So we need to prove that BA is congruent to BC. We need a plan of attack first. I'd love to prove that these triangles are congruent, because if these triangles are congruent, then their corresponding parts will be congruent. And I can prove that these triangles are congruent by either side, 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 angle, side, all those good things. Let's see what they gave us. So they told us that BD is the median, which means that it'll split this guy in half. That D is the midpoint, so that will be congruent to that. And it's also the altitude, which means it's perpendicular, so that will be congruent. Those will be right angles. And, oh, awesome. So by our reflexive property, that's congruent to itself. So these two triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. Their sides are the same, these are both right angles, and therefore they're congruent, and this side is clearly congruent to itself. So this triangle is congruent to that triangle by side, side, angle, side congruence, and therefore their corresponding parts are congruent by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Yes. So we stepped through it really quickly. It's not too hard to see, but unfortunately it takes a little while to write. Don't be too scared by all the verbiage here. Sometimes you're allowed to kind of skip. I just wrote everything out this time. So we always start with our given, and then we said that D, so when they tell us it's the definition, the strict definition of median is that this would be the midpoint. And so then once you know it's the midpoint, then it breaks it up into two congruent parts. So I kind of stepped it from there to there. You could go straight to that if you were being a little, yeah, if you wanted to. Some teachers will let you. So AD is congruent to DC by the definition of midpoint. And then because BD is the altitude, I know that BD is perpendicular to AC, and that's by the definition of altitude, and therefore these angles are right angles by the definition of perpendicular, and therefore they are congruent because all right angles are congruent. There's actually a theorem for that, and that theorem takes a couple things to do with the measures. Everything is just slightly tedious. It's okay. Then we said BD was congruent to itself, reflexive property of congruence, and then we say that the triangles are congruent to each other by side, angle, side congruent, and therefore BA is congruent to BC by corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And there you have it.